Hi everyone. Today we're going to start a brand new unit on quadratic equations and functions. This is going to build off of Unit 8 when we learn how to factor. Today's topic is called the zero product property, and you can use today's date. We'll also use this note packet tomorrow. This is the note packet you'll need to go through today and tomorrow's notes. I know that your packets might have been a little bit disorganized, so here's a picture of all the forms you'll need for today's lesson. So the zero product property starts like this. It says if that you multiply two numbers and you know that that result is zero, what values of A and B will make this equation true? We actually have a couple different scenarios that we can explore. In the first scenario, we have A times B equaling 0. We're going to allow A to be 0, and then B can take on any real number. If one of the factors is 0, we know that the entire answer will be 0. Maybe in scenario 2, we allow A to be any real number, and B takes the value of 0. Doesn't matter, the result is still going to provide a 0. And ultimately, it could be that both A and B have a value of 0, and when you multiply them, the result is still 0. We're going to use this idea moving forward. So if you know that 0 is one of the factors, or both, that the product of 0 is going to be created. So what we'll do is take the factoring that we learned in our last unit, and we'll set each of those binomial factors equal to 0. Each of those binomial factors represents a real number, and the product of those binomials will give me 0. This is the procedure that we'll use when we solve a quadratic function. The first thing you want to do is put your function into standard form. Remember, that's placing the largest exponent first, and then x to the first, and then the constant. And we set it equal to 0. So this will be new for us. Don't forget this. This is the difference between an expression and equation. We also want to try to keep our first term, the x squared term, positive. So if you have to move terms around, we want to push the items so that x squared will remain positive. Once we have it in standard form, you're going to factor the quadratic equation. We're going to come up with the two binomials that would create it. Once we've picked the right binomial factors, we will set each factor equal to 0, and then we're going to solve for x, and this will tell us where our solutions are. And then ultimately, we want to check that our solutions will actually work and are correct. So what we do is we'll take those x values and sub them into the original function. So for example, number 1, I don't see a greatest common factor that can be removed. So what I'll do is I will look at the 4, and I know that the factors are 1 and 4 and 2 and 2. There's only a small number of correct factors, so I'm not going to list them, but I know that 1 and 4 will add up to 5. So I'm going to break those into two binomials, x plus 1 and x plus 4. Now we have them set equal to 0. I'm going to take the first binomial, x plus 1, and set that equal to 0. We'll subtract 1 from each side, and one of our solutions lies at x equals -1. If I sub -1 into the original function, I will get a +1 in the first term, a -5 in the second term, which is -4, and then +4 equals 0. So this first one does work. The second binomial, x plus 4, gets set equal to 0. Same thing, I'm going to solve for x, and I see that I have a solution at -4. I also want to sub that in. So -4 squared is 16, and then I'll have -20, which is -4, and then +4 is 0. When we're done with this process, we want to write our solution set, which we abbreviate SS, in our fancy brackets. Some teachers like to order these from smallest to largest. It doesn't really matter. No one's going to penalize you. We just want to have a correct solution set when we're done. Moving on to example number 2, again, I'm looking for a greatest common factor. And right now I don't see one. So I'm going to start by coming up with factors that will multiply to 16 and add up to -8. So we have 1 and 16, 2 and 8, and 4 and 4. 4 and 4 is a great possibility, but both signs have to be negative to achieve a -8. And don't forget, we are set equal to 0. Now, I'm going to set the first binomial equal to 0, and I'm going to solve and see that one of my solutions is at x equals +4. But I think that you've noticed that the other binomial factor is identical. So we have 2 solutions at 4. This is called a double root, and when you see this function graphed on the iPad, what you're going to see is only one point at 4. So we don't want to write our solution set twice. We understand that this is the same answer. Let me do a check first. So 4 squared is 16. Then we have -32, which is -16, plus 16 equals 0. So 4 is a correct solution. When I write my solution set up, we only write 4 once. In example number 3, I can see that my equation was not in standard form. So in my first line, what I did is I added 10 to both sides to move it over and set it equal to 0. Now it's in the correct standard form. Again, I want to come up with factors that multiply to 10 and add up to -7. So you can see here that -5 and -2 are the correct solution. And now I'm going to set each factor equal to 0. So we have a +5, and we also have a +2. I'm going to sub these into the original. So 5 squared is 25, -35 is -10, and that does check. When I sub in 2, I have 4, -14, and that's also -10, so that checks as well. And my solution set is both 2 and 5. These represent places when we see the graph where we're going to have zeros on our graph. In example number 4, I'm starting by looking for a GCF. Now I do notice that both of these terms have something in common. So I'm going to remove the GCF, which is x, and I'm going to write down what's left over. At this time, 7x plus 2 does not factor. So the factoring process is over. We're going to set x, which is my first factor, it's a monomial, equal to 0. Is it possible that x is 0? Absolutely. So this is a good solution. We're also going to set 7x plus 2 equal to 0. I'm going to start by subtracting 2 from each side, and then I'll go through and divide both sides by 7. So in this case, this is my first fractional answer. This is a rational number, but it's -2/7. If I sub in 0, I'm going to get a 0 on the left side, so this one checks. If you want to check the second one on your calculator, you can go through and do that. I highly recommend it. I do know that it will work. So in my solution set, I have 0 and -2/7. We're going to skip example 5 until tomorrow, so please go to number 6. In this equation, I can see that it's not in standard form. So the first thing you want to do is add 6 to both sides so that your equation equals 0. Now, when I look at this, I do see that there's a greatest common factor. If you look at all 3 terms, they all have 6 in common. So I'm going to remove the 6 and then write down what's left over. And hopefully this looks familiar to you. My leftover is a trinomial that is factorable. So it needs to multiply to +1, add up to -2. And we know that our options are limited. So we'll have 6 and then two binomials that are both x minus 1. Oh, and I didn't put x equals 0, so there's a mistake for me. The 6 as a greatest common factor does get set equal to 0, but we know that this is not true, so we slash that 6 does not equal 0, and this factor becomes rejected. We do write reject on our paper, so please make sure you do that. X minus 1 is my first binomial factor, so I'm going to add 1 to both sides, and I have a root at 1, and you will notice that both of the binomials were the same. So even though I look like I have 2 answers, I really only have 1. Let's sub it in and check. So 1 squared will be 1 times 6 is 6. 6 minus 12 is negative 6, and that does check. So in my solution set, I only have a root of 1. Today's homework is number 101. You'll find it in your packet. It says zero product property, and question number 1 will have m squared plus 90 equals negative 19m. Please make sure you show all work and that it's very thorough. If you have any questions when you're working on this, please don't be afraid to contact me. You can text my cell, you can call my home number, or you can email me. Remember in the 4th quarter that grades are due every single day, and failing grades will be put in if you do not submit an assignment. If you have any questions, give me a call. Have a great day.